War Palace and Knee Pillow, Introduction to Austria's Destiny. Let others go to war, you, lucky Austria, go get married. What the god of war can bestow upon you, so can the god of love. The smoke of the Napoleonic Wars has dissipated, and the Vienna system, which once brought peace to Europe, is now riddled with holes. Under the seemingly calm surface of peace, there is a turbulent era of turbulence, the tranquility before the storm. The air was filled with sweat and mist, and the choking black smoke made it difficult to breathe. On the elegant dining table, a group of soldiers and fat people in suits were pushing and pushing each other, feasting on the feast called the world. Van Gogh's self-portrait hung on the wall, and Strauss's father and son waltzes lingered in his ears. Suddenly, the music turned into a march, and the scene shifted to the battlefield. The soldiers marched in a straight line towards the machine gun barbed wire. A shell landed on the ground, and after the smoke of gunpowder, countless cavalry charged towards the position where the artillery was located. Accompanied by a loud noise, a steam tank kept spraying flames. A wooden plane flew close to the ground, dropped the bomb, and quickly pulled up, breaking through the clouds and shining brightly. Chapter 1. The Separated Prince. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In 1834, the Austrian Empire, Vienna. The blue sky and clear river water make this a livable city, but it doesn't seem like the capital of a great power in the 19th century. The relatively gloomy sky, accompanied by severe haze and black rivers, although not environmentally friendly, is definitely a symbol of the strength of a country in this era, such as London in the UK. A classic Baroque-style building with an exterior, but an interior design from the Rococo period. The antique furniture displayed is even more diverse, from Eastern porcelain to Baltic wax stones, everything is available. Its owner was Franz II, the last monarch of the Holy Roman Empire and also the first monarch of the Austrian Empire. Franz II was currently facing a difficult choice. Whether to choose an excellent heir or to uphold tradition. Perhaps due to intergenerational relationships, Franz II has been doting on this special grandson since his birth. A healthy and intellectually disabled baby boy is his hope, and also the hope of this empire. That's right, the Austrian Empire did face the problem of having no qualified heirs at that time. Today, Franz II's eldest grandson was in the children's room, taking out 5 letters and arranging a combination that he could not ignore. A.E.I.O.U, that is a sentence left by Friedrich III at Stephen's Cathedral, which is still engraved on the shrine to this day. Meanwhile, this was also the only method that Franz Joseph could think of that could catch the attention of the old emperor. Austria is destined. Franz II murmured. Friedrich III was the last Holy Roman Emperor to be crowned by the Pope in Rome. However, he could not be considered an excellent emperor. In the face of Hungarian aggression, his own strength was insufficient, and his vassals were passive. His allies stopped and watched, forcing him to hastily go west. I wanted to carry out reforms and eliminate accumulated drawbacks, but ended up being abandoned in the opposition of the aristocracy. In the end, I had to live a solitary life, enjoying studying astrology and alchemy. Isn't it true that Francis II, his grandmother, Empress Teresa, was too dazzling to make future heirs appear dull? Even more terrifying was the radical reforms of Joseph II, the previous emperor, and the shock therapy of Leopold II, the previous emperor, which plunged Austria into chaos. At the same time, France, as its arch-enemy, also saw figures like Napoleon emerge. In the era known as Napoleon, Franz II and the Holy Roman Empire, who opposed Napoleon, naturally became the backdrop of the era. The two capitals fell, marrying a daughter to seek peace, and dissolving the Holy Roman Empire. Franz II had too much unwillingness in his heart, but his legal heir, his eldest son Ferdinand, seemed unable to bear the heavy burden of reviving the empire. His second son also lacks the ability to govern the country. However, Franz II's eldest grandson was a special child. Although Franz Joseph's behavior was somewhat strange, he showed extremely high intelligence from a young age. However, Franz was too young, and there was no precedent in the Austrian Empire for his eldest son to inherit the throne. Franz II still remembers the War of Austrian Succession caused by a state decree. On the other hand, there are things deeply rooted in his soul that he cannot forget for a long time. There is no emperor in this world who does not wish to expand their territory and promote national prosperity and prosperity. Not to mention the emperor, even ordinary people hope to live in a strong country. Who wants to live in a country where wars are raging, people are struggling, and they just go out and engage in gunfights? But Franz II, he did not achieve it and led the country step by step towards decline. He also understood in his heart that he didn't have this opportunity anymore, so he could only hope for the next generation. Is it the eldest son with intellectual disabilities or the second son with autism? They obviously don't have that ability, at least they won't do it better than themselves. Franz II really didn't want the declining Austria in front of him to be the pinnacle of the future empire. What Franz II did not know was that the Austrian Empire had only experienced 3 monarchs in history, which existed in name only after the Austro-Prussian War in 1866. It was replaced by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a dull empire, which completely disappeared into the long river of history after World War I. At this moment, his eldest grandson Franz Joseph did not know how conflicted Franz II was in his heart. His soul comes from later generations. Although he had neither a computer nor a mobile phone in the 19th century, he was at least born into a royal family and should be able to be a playboy. But he soon understood that the identity he had acquired through his travels was the famous tragic emperor of history. Franz Joseph. His relationship with Princess Zichy is well known to the world. But his brothers, parents, descendants, and wife all passed away before him. His empire became the backdrop for the rise of Germany and France, and then completely collapsed in World War I. Franz Joseph's life can only be described as tragedy, but it is not enough to describe it. He was the last monarch of the Austrian Empire and also the first monarch of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. 2 years after his death, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was destroyed and shattered. However, at this moment, what worries Franz the most is not these, but the debt problem of this country and this family. The debt of over 1 billion florins is truly exaggerated. At this time, the Austrian imperial government's annual fiscal revenue was about 110 million florins, and its annual fiscal expenditure exceeded 100 million florins. According to this calculation, even if the debt does not generate interest, the Austrian Empire would take over 100 years to repay the money. Franz unconsciously felt grief arising from it. Fortunately, Franz Joseph was born early enough now, but his body seemed unable to do much. All he could think of was trying to please the old emperor and attract his attention. After all, the old emperor held real power, unlike Ferdinand who had to be approved by the regent's council for his policies. If the old emperor were happy and rewarded some estates and industries, Franz would have the start-up capital, and with his vision far beyond the times, he would definitely make a big profit. At least Franz thinks so. The reason why Franz was so eager was that the first time point to change the fate of the Austrian Empire was getting closer and closer. In 1834, the German customs union was established, and the Austrian Empire refused to join, thus ringing the death knell for this empire. On the other hand, Franz II, who was anxious in his heart, decided to ask God. Of course, it's not really about going to heaven to ask God, but going to the church to ask God's messengers. Since ancient times, emperors in the East have always liked to seek immortality and divination when facing indecisive situations. Even in modern times, there is nothing to do with looking at constellations, asking tarot for small things, and calculating gossip for big things. The East is the same, and the West is the same, so Franz II appeared at the entrance of St. Stephen's Cathedral. Chapter 2. This is an inspiration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Stephen's Cathedral is the largest church in Vienna and also the place where the Austrian emperor was crowned and buried. It can be said to be a symbol of Vienna. At the same time, it is located in the center of the city center of Vienna, hence it is known as the heart of Vienna. The cathedral was built in 1304 and completed 2 centuries later. It has a Gothic style and a Renaissance flavor. Outside the church, you can see 230,000 pieces of colored glass on the roof. Under the sunlight, the colorful glass that forms a double-headed eagle can be considered a masterpiece. Pushing open the church gate, the smell of antiquity and dust rushed towards us, followed by the smell of resin and frankincense. Entering the cathedral, the light inside gradually dimmed, with only the candlelight on the shrine shining brightly. The temperature seems to have also dropped, making people feel peaceful and calm. Surrounded by the distant smoke and fire, a solemn and sacred scent spread, and Franz II's heart seemed to calm down. The emperor personally visited, and as the Archbishop of Vienna, Locker naturally had to personally welcome him. However, his obese body and flamboyant attire seem out of place with this ancient and sacred church. Franz II was very anxious this time and did not wait for Archbishop Locker, who always arrived late. He walked straight towards the shrine worshipped by the family, gently caressing the ancient text engraved on the shrine with his fingers. Unexpectedly, Archbishop Locker, who was usually slow, was surprisingly quick this time. Actually, as a bishop appointed and dismissed by the emperor, how could he neglect the emperor? Oh! Praising the grace of Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the touch of the Holy Spirit, what brought the great king of this world here? Franz II waved his hand and said, "I'm just here to pay homage to my ancestors, so please don't be polite." Archbishop Locker could certainly hear that there was something to be said. Originally, as the spokesperson of God, he wanted to be reserved. But he suddenly remembered His Majesty the Emperor, who wanted face and had poor patience. "Your Majesty, in God's dwelling, you can speak without hesitation." Franz II pondered for a moment before deciding to speak out. After all, he himself was a devout Catholic, and the Archbishop of Vienna in front of him was his official, not an outsider. The most important reason is that this chubby guy will definitely speak according to himself. It sounds very nice. European monarchs also use special first-person titles, and when Tsars refer to themselves, they use plural first person, to demonstrate the unique identity of the monarch. The French monarch would say Je or nous. The German monarch will call himself Wer, which means, I. When translated, my grandson Franz Jr., today in the children's room, he put forward the prophecy of Friedrich III. What is that? Locker instinctively asked, and the next second he realized something was wrong. Isn't it written on the shrine he faces all day? To conceal his embarrassment, he could only adopt a very indifferent attitude, as if nothing had happened. A.E.I.O.U, Franz II blurted it out, with a hint of pride in his tone. This is a revelation. The archbishop immediately possessed a stick. Throughout history, both in China and abroad, the divine sticks are the same, and Locker is no exception. He likes to follow the emperor's words, and he himself is a primitive sect, searching for the so-called born sage throughout his life. Archbishop, do you mean? Franz II appeared somewhat excited because he himself thought the same way. Unfortunately, he is not a hero. Even if he has his own ideas, he also wants to rely on gods and ghosts to support his ideas. Locker naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity and flatter him head-on. This is an auspicious omen, indicating that the grand ambition of the Austrian Empire will be realized. Archbishop Locker looked confident, as if he had truly received some inspiration. Actually, upon careful analysis, there is no difference between saying something like this and not saying it. Although Archbishop Locker said that the empire's hegemony would eventually be achieved, he did not specify when or to what extent it could be achieved. Therefore, strictly speaking, it is not a lie or a violation of doctrine. But for Franz II, who was cunning and indecisive, this was undoubtedly a shot in the arm. Because this is not his idea, it is God's will. In short, even if there was a problem, he didn't take the blame and suddenly became happy. Locker has been in the position of Archbishop of Vienna for so many years, and he still has the ability to observe his words and expressions. He thought to himself, the emperor is not in the right state today. Is he going to pass on the throne to his grandson? Then Locker thought of the state edict, which made his heart skip a beat. But then he thought of Queen Teresa, the prosperity of the Teresa era, the strength of the church, and his mood calmed down again. Your Majesty, I have also seen Archduke Franz, and he is indeed a special child. Do you remember when I baptized him back then, he gave me a wet blanket. Locker had a good impression of Franz because he always held a Bible in his hand and couldn't put it down. He must be a devout believer. Actually, Franz doesn't know much German yet. I like holding the Bible because it is big enough to cushion my feet and the cover is soft enough to serve as a cushion. Sometimes, as a member of the royal family, Franz had to place several more books under his buttocks in order to maintain a dignified sitting posture. In addition, it can also be used to beat his younger brother, Maximilian. Maximilian is Franz's second brother, and the two seem to have a natural mismatch in their birth chart. They always fight and argue. Maximilian naturally couldn't beat Franz, who had been human for 2 generations, but Franz couldn't really get along with a child. Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. Then Franz came up with a solution, finding a thick and large book, pressing it on Maximilian's back, and sitting on it himself, so that the dispute between the children could be peacefully resolved, and that book happened to be the Bible. As a result, Maximilian was often suppressed by Franz's Bible on his back, and only his hands and feet could move. That way, it's like a little bastard with a shell pressed down. But what the Archbishop sees is a devout believer who never leaves the Bible. On the other hand, Archbishop Locker himself has always wanted to find a natural saint and restore public trust in Catholicism. But after so many years of searching and experiencing countless failures, he made a decision. Instead of waiting for the saint to appear, it's better to create one yourself. Now that the old emperor is determined, Lao Shi naturally will not miss this opportunity. If this child were to inherit the throne in the future, he would not become the emperor's godfather, and at that time, he would be guaranteed to be Richelieu. He had power over the court during his lifetime and would remain immortal after his death. Richelieu, a famous red bishop in history. Your Majesty, you should follow your inner choices, and your choices are the will of God. Richer naturally cannot say what he wants to do, he can only throw the pot to God. Archbishop, what do you want to say? Locker didn't expect that the usually straightforward old emperor would say so, he didn't even want his face and smiled awkwardly. May the Austrian Empire have eternal peace and stability. The old emperor also smiled. He was not a wise ruler, but he would not be swayed by a god. This was his pride as an emperor, although it was of no use. Perhaps this is really a revelation. Chapter 3. Unreliable One Company. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In 1834, Franz was still a little baby, 4 years old, and he could only stay bored in the royal children's room every day. Night is the most difficult time to endure, because an unreliable mother will come to coax him to sleep. Mrs. Sophie felt that coaxing the child to sleep was fulfilling a mother's duty, so Franz couldn't sleep anymore. The big rabbit is sick, the second rabbit looks, the third rabbit buys medicine, the fourth rabbit cooks, the fifth rabbit dies, the sixth rabbit lifts, the seventh rabbit digs a pit, the eighth rabbit buries, the ninth rabbit sits on the ground crying, and the 10th rabbit asks why it cries. 9 rabbits said, 5 rabbits never come back. The eerie lyrics of the song make people think deeply and fear deeply, but the mother seems to have not paid attention to the child's reaction, still singing on her own, occasionally taking a breath, and still complaining in her heart, why is the child still not sleeping? Franz didn't feel sleepy, but the eerie lyrics of the song lingered in his mind, making him so scared that he couldn't sleep. You should know that this is one of the top 10 horror nursery rhymes that will be passed down in later generations. Why did Mrs. Sophie choose this nursery rhyme? Finally, Franz found a way to tell his own story, coax Mrs. Sophie to sleep, and then ask the maid to take her away. Just as Franz was taking a breath, a man full of alcohol walked in. This liquor has a distinctive flavor, not just the taste of a single type of liquor, but a mixture of many types of liquor. It was Franz's unreliable father who came, and he knew he was different from a normal person, so he always avoided others when he came. Parents all care about their children the same way, whether they are imperial relatives or ordinary people. So Franz's father came with a pot of wine. Franz's father only has two hobbies, one is drinking and the other is hunting. He believes that alcohol is the best thing in the world, because when you get drunk, you won't get tired and won't remember those unhappy things. Franz has never cried since he was born, so he felt that Franz must be very depressed and he felt that Franz must need to be released. He also remembered the words his father once said, "Good things should be shared with family." So today he mixed his 10 favorite wines together and came to the children's room. "I want to share my favorite wine with my eldest son, so that he can grow up quickly. After all, wine is boring to drink alone." He poured Franz a glass, poured himself another, and then giggled foolishly. Franz's head was covered in black lines, and he couldn't help but feel how the original owner lived so old. Then he walked to the door and opened it, calling the maid in and whispering a few words. Afterwards, the maid Mrs. Mercia screamed and quickly rushed in with a large group of royal guards and doctors, packing Franz's unreliable father away. Hofburg Palace, Mirror Hall. Franz too was sitting on the throne sleeping in the morning, enjoying this room as if it would allow him to relive the glory of the Habsburg family. Yesterday's conversation at St. Stephen's Cathedral, what other inspirations, and those unreliable plans have been forgotten by him. Compared to those adventurous actions, he prefers to enjoy the comfort brought by the afternoon sunshine. Franz too was never a brave person. His younger brother once carried out radical military reforms, revitalizing the Austrian army and offending some vested interests. He did not resist the pressure and dismissed Archduke Karl, whom Napoleon referred to as his strongest opponent. The result is that even today, the military issues of the last century still plague the Austrian Empire. Franz too was well aware that Austria's influence both domestically and internationally was declining, but the heavy debt and tangled network of interests made all reforms difficult, and every time they were in a state of pressing the gourd and lifting the gourd. So, he remembered again that he should have listened to the advice of his other brother, Duke John, to carry out economic reforms, cancel domestic tariffs, and use this to suppress the powerful. At that time, it was the time of Napoleon's invasion, and the local power faction was severely weakened. It was a good time for domestic unity to reform, but he also did not adopt that Austria should also join the recently established German customs union. This is a conspiracy of the Prussians. We must do something, there can only be one giant within the German Confederation. Once Prussia takes control of the customs union, their development will be unstoppable. At that time, the whole hall was full of quarrels, and every minister seemed to be ready to fight. Both Chancellor of the Exchequer Korolev, Prime Minister Metternich, and Baron Bruck, who was beyond measure, approached Franz too, stating the pros and cons of joining the German customs union and strongly recommending the empire to join. Being excluded from the German customs union would greatly weaken Austria's influence. But the nobles in the country opposed it, such as Prince Wendy-Goritz and Princess Thesai, and so on. Franz too felt that he could not ignore these voices, and he also had no way to. There's no way. Franz too couldn't help but laugh at himself with a hint of sadness. He didn't feel like a supreme monarch, but rather like an old widower who was led by the nose by family trivial matters. Today is the day when the German customs union, led by Prussia, was officially established. An 8-year tariff agreement will serve as the foundation for the future disintegration of Austria's influence. In front of the palace gate, Prime Minister Metternich, Chancellor of the Exchequer Korolev, and Baron Bruck, 3 people with different political views and almost no contact, rarely reached an agreement on one matter. Austria must join the German customs union, said Baron Bruck, who had always been straightforward. He never liked to play tricks and firmly believed that everything he did was for the country. Chancellor Korolev detested the man in front of him because Baron Bruck always liked to talk about serving the country and the people. Korolev is completely different. He never conceals his greed for money and power. He believes that those who refuse to talk about benefits are all hypocrites who pretend to be themselves, or it could be a deception thrown by vested interests in a certain field to protect their own interests. These hypocrites are often more terrifying and dirty than those who are greedy for money and power. Austria is not going to join the German customs union, but to lead it. Prussia is not worthy of leading the German customs union. Germany is the dumping ground for our goods, the origin of our raw materials, and Austria does not have a colony of its own, which is unacceptable. Germany is our first colony. Korolev finished speaking and looked at Baron Brooke provocatively. What you think, I'll speak for you. I heard from the doctor that holding it all the time is not good for my body. Don't thank me. Korolev laughed up and walked towards the palace gate. Baron Brooke sneered at Korolev's behavior and sneered. Crazy. Then he also strode into the palace gate with great strides. Chapter 4. 23 Attempts to Establish the German Customs Union, Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Metternich, who fell behind, looked at his two colleagues and sighed. Although these people are full of confidence, with their understanding of the old emperor, they are unlikely to succeed this time. As an idealist, he is not willing to give up, even if the hope is slim. Metternich really likes the term European Prime Minister. It was only after becoming the Prime Minister of the Austrian Empire that he realized that guiding the country was not as easy as he thought. In the past, as a diplomat, even if he was surrounded and slandered by many people, he could cleverly resolve it with language. However, as the Prime Minister of the Empire, without money, he couldn't even afford to hire a clerk, and he couldn't even leave Vienna for political orders, let alone reform. The relationship within Austria is more complex than the situation in Europe. Joining the German customs union was clearly beneficial to the Austrian Empire without causing any harm. But unfortunately, he faced strong opposition, which was far more intense than he had imagined. Because cancelling tariffs will affect the income of some people, the entry of goods from the German region into Austria will also affect the profits of some people, and even the increase in the German population in Austria will affect the status of some people, and Emperor Franz II was also soft-hearted and afraid of taking responsibility. So the ultimate outcome is highly likely to be doing nothing and maintaining the status quo. Metternich was well aware that to maintain Austria's position as the president of the German Federal Republic, either joining the German customs union or preventing its establishment. He tried the latter, but failed. Led by Prussia, the 6 states of North Germany established a customs union in 1826, and tariffs between the participating states were abolished. The following year, the 2 major states of South Germany, Bavaria and Württemberg, formed the South German Customs Union. Later, other South German states also joined in response to the Prussian organization's customs union. In 1828, the states of Hanover, Saxony, Thuringia, and the cities of the Hanseatic League formed the Sino-German Customs Union against Prussia. But who would struggle with the money bag? So these organizations established to fight against Prussia collapsed and eventually became the cornerstone of the German Customs Union. The establishment of the German Customs Union is good news for Prussia, as well as for Austria. Although Austrian goods cannot compare with those of England and France at this time, and even inferior to Belgian goods, he is still very confident compared to Prussia. As long as the German Customs Union is mastered, not only can Austria's economic situation be alleviated, but also its control over the German Federation can be strengthened, thereby revitalizing its great power. As long as he has money, Metternich can carry out reforms and unleash his ambitions. On the other hand, Prince Wendy-Goritz and a group of powerful figures also arrived at the palace gate. Their only purpose on this trip is to prevent Austria from joining the German customs union. Because Bohemia is close to South Germany and Saxony, exempting tariffs would greatly affect the income of local aristocratic officials. Prince Esterházy even came from Hungary overnight with his people, not because of money. In his view, trading with Prussia would also facilitate his purchase of Prussian luxury goods, amber, agate, pearls, with less money. But once Austria and Germany establish closer relations, Austria's German population will increase, which is highly likely to affect the power of the Hungarian nobility within the empire, which he and they cannot tolerate. Bolster, a banker, was actually a representative of the Rothschild family. His reason for opposition was that Solomon Rothschild wanted to permanently dominate the banking business of the Austrian Empire. Now within the Austrian Empire, several well-known banking families have either declined or are in a state of shock due to the delay in recovering the empire's debts. Once restrictions were lifted, North German banks would enter the Austrian Empire, thereby affecting the interests of the family. In Vienna, within the Mirror Hall, both sides once again erupted into fierce arguments. The side that supports joining the German customs union, whether it is Metternich, Korolev, or Bruck, are experts in their own fields. This made this debate clear from the beginning. It seems that it should be so. However, can the correct and well-founded side win? To present facts and reason, it is obvious that these aristocratic elders are not in their area of expertise. Fishing in troubled waters and playing court politics are their profession. The staff they hired with a lot of money are not meant to eat dry rice. Especially the nobles seized Metternich, who had attempted to establish the German customs union with Austria as its core, but the unhappy outcome persisted. Your Highness, have you forgotten how they parted ways with Saxony and how Bavaria betrayed their faith? Yes, even Baden and Württemberg became enemies with us because of this. Have you forgotten about it? Another noble agreed. At this moment, Metternich remembered how these privileged individuals acted cleverly and led to the alliance's explanation. Due to the competitive relationship between industrial products in Saxony and Austria, and the possibility of crops from Prussia entering Hungary through Saxony, it may affect their interests. Opponents even bribed officials to prevent the entry of Saxon missions in order to prevent trade between the Austrian Empire and Saxony. Finally, the Saxon mission had to enter Austria through Bavaria. At the meeting, these nobles put forward harsh conditions and even demanded that the Saxon government limit the quantity and variety of goods exported to Austria, which led to the Saxon ambassador leaving in anger. Afterwards, he even bribed his close courtiers around the King of Saxony, spreading false news that Austria intends to make Saxony a vassal. At this time, King Anton I of Saxony, who claimed to be the master of the strongest state of North Germany, fantasized about annexing Prussia sooner or later and competing with Austria. How could he possibly accept the humiliation of submitting to Austria? So, the commercial alliance between Austria and Saxony was declared broken. The three southern German countries are more similar to Austria in terms of culture and religion, with a strong emphasis on liberalism and a strong interest in profitable activities. Many great Germans even consider themselves subjects of the Holy Roman Empire. The churches of the three southern German countries also hope to use this to bring closer relations with Austria and resist the influence of North German Protestants. The churches of Austria also hope to enhance the influence of the Catholic Church and counter the growing Protestant forces in the country. Under the clever blending of Metternich, the attitudes of the Church, the people, and the bureaucrats were unprecedentedly consistent, which was already the trend, but the nobles were not willing to accept it. The nobles first resorted to old tricks and planned to make things difficult for the mission. However, this time Metternich became clever and found a general who was not only a nobleman but also out of place in the aristocratic circle. Julius Hainau. To receive the mission. This person is the illegitimate son of the candidate Marquis of Hesse and has no inheritance rights, so he should not have been a noble. But in the Napoleonic Wars, he came to Austria alone and performed well on the battlefield, earning the title of the Austrian Empire. The legitimate aristocrats hold such illegitimate children from a wild background in great contempt. At the same time, Hainau also looked down upon those so-called nobles who relied on the shade of their ancestors and would wet their pants in battle. At the same time, the sea agate has another identity that makes the nobles even more disgusted. He is a Jew, and his mother is the daughter of a Jewish businessman. She first married a blacksmith, and then became the lover of the Grand Duke of Hesse, unwilling to be lonely, and secretly gave birth to a sea agate. The existence of the sea agate is unacceptable to the nobility, and its ominous name makes all those who try to cause trouble hesitate. Just this time, the nobles went even further. Their actions can no longer be considered as treason, they are simply selling their country. This time, they directly approached the French. Chapter 5. 23 Attempts to Establish the German Customs Union, Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time goes back until the nobles find the French. Because of the existence of the sea agate, the great nobles cannot directly take action. After all, no one wants to give it a try. This crazy dog's knife is not sharp enough. So, the nobles repeated their old tricks and promoted Austria's ambition towards the three southern German countries. The three kings of South Germany showed no concern, and officials began to inquire whether they could retain their official positions and salary benefits after joining Austria. The reason why Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden, the three southern German countries, chose to lie flat was also due to helplessness. After the Napoleonic Wars, France was not weakened much. The situation sandwiched between the two male lions of France and Austria remains unbroken. On the contrary, the Napoleonic Wars caused great damage to the rule of the three southern German countries. Although the three southern German countries were victorious, their strength not only did not strengthen, but also experienced a huge decline. In addition, Prussia gained control of the Rhine region, and this fierce wolf sense of oppression towards South Germany grew day by day. At this time, the three southern German countries had no seaports and were themselves agricultural nations. To develop oneself, one can only rely on the powerful countries around them who are eyeing closely. Seeking skin from a tiger has never been an easy task. Austria used to see them as a defensive barrier against France, the French used them as gunmen, almost squeezing out the three southern German countries during their expedition to Russia, and even burying tens of thousands of troops in the icy snow and ice of Russia. The Prussians supported them only to weaken Austria, and as for the cost, anyone who understands will understand. The domestic public, aristocratic class, and even capitalists have long been dissatisfied with this incompetent government. Everyone hopes to change the status quo and have a strong country to protect their lives and property. A unified country and a unified market are their most urgent needs. That's also why South Germany became the main gathering place for the Greater German faction. The Habsburg family, as the former royal family of the Holy Roman Empire and the current chairman of the German Confederation, seems to rely on the authority of Austria and the Habsburg family as the quickest way to unify Germany. On the other hand, the reputation of the Habsburg family is good, and the status and property of the nobles can be guaranteed, and even a good compensation can be obtained. For those aristocrats with severe overall fiscal deficits, this poses a considerable temptation. Isn't it beautiful to take advantage of the transition of political power and eliminate a group of creditors? Austrian law stipulates that officials must understand German. This is a great good thing for officials and young talents in South Germany and the Three Kingdoms. A larger country means more jobs. After all, the number of Austrian ethnic groups is very insufficient compared to their size. The nobles cannot succeed in their conspiracy and can only rely on their own schemes, which is to manipulate public opinion. However, Manette was already prepared and specifically approached Archbishop Locker to present the pros and cons before the negotiations. At the negotiation table, a group of church bishops came uninvited. Faced with this group of gods, the Austrian nobles couldn't stand it anymore. After all, only Brahmins could defeat Kshatri. Public opinion. Who says public opinion opposes joining the German Customs Union? Archbishop Linz said somewhat disdainfully. The arrogant high-ranking officials who had just been arrogant immediately became worthless, and only a young man whispered, "This is the conclusion we have drawn after our investigation." Oh! Archbishop Linz couldn't help but laugh. "Which diocese are you from, child?" The bishops around looked at each other and all laughed. It's just that the staff of these great nobles can't be laughed at. The Diocese of Bohemia, the young man replied. Okay, child. Archbishop Linz turned to Archbishop Pulslau, your Bohemian diocese should hold a vote and let this child see the conclusion. At this time, the church still held a considerable weight in the Austrian Empire, and it may be difficult for the parishioners to surrender their assets and fight against the enemy. However, manipulating a voting election can still be achieved in minutes. Alright, who is still against it now? We accept the Catholic Brothers of South Germany. Archbishop Locker's words were even more explicit, and there was a hint of contempt in them. In this era, the relationship between the church and the aristocracy was not very good, especially those new aristocrats engaged in industry and commerce. Because they refused to pay tithes and refused to pay tithes for their employees. Especially after the implementation of religious freedom in the Austrian Empire, the nobility and the church gradually parted ways. The church is dependent on the state, while the nobles hope to gain more power. Of course, there is both opposition and cooperation between the nobility and the church. Many bishops come from noble backgrounds, and many nobles send their second son and daughters who cannot get a good dowry to the church to avoid property division. And when it comes to manipulating public opinion, the nobles are really not opponents of the church. Faced with the church, no nobleman is willing to come forward and find such misfortune. The only solution that can be thought of is a procrastination technique. Metternich had anticipated the procrastination techniques used by the nobles, but he didn't think they could do anything else. At most, he is inciting uprisings at the local level. He has ordered the Minister of War, Count Latour, to closely monitor domestic movements. However, Metternich underestimated the lower limit of this group of nobles. Shortly thereafter, a letter and 200,000 francs were placed on the desk of French cabinet minister Guizot. Your Excellency Guizot. The great France is suffering from shameless conspiracies, and the despicable Germans are preparing to unite against the great French Empire. The evil Prince Metternich intends to use an alliance to gradually annex the 3 southern German states. Once the German conspiracy succeeds, the balance of power in Europe will inevitably be disrupted. The haze of war will once again envelop the skies of Europe, for the sake of freedom and peace. I hope you can save kind and innocent people from the baptism of war. Europeans who truly love peace. Similar letters have also been received by the British, but before the British could react, the French took the initiative. Guizot immediately issued a note to the 3 southern German countries under the command of Marshal Soult, demanding that they not join the tariff alliance organized by Austria, otherwise they would retain the right to use force to dissolve the alliance. The leaders of the 3 southern German countries immediately panicked and quickly recalled the envoy sent to Austria for negotiations. Regarding the note from France, the main faction led by the Minister of War, Count Latour, advocated for the immediate gathering of troops and notifying the Holy Alliance countries to mobilize for war against France. The nobles are warning the emperor that the Austrian treasury is empty and the troops are insufficient. The most important thing is to go to war with the French, with Austria being the first to suffer huge losses. If you don't want the tragedy of the Napoleonic Wars to repeat itself, the best way is not to go to war. You cowards! Do you think the French won't be able to see you even if you're a shrunken turtle? France is strong, but have you forgotten who defeated him? Count Latour had a hot temper, and as an anti-French veteran, he couldn't bear it more than to increase the French's prestige. Latour. You rascal, you don't have money. Do you want to go to the battlefield on your own? Besides, because of Bavaria, Baden, and Württemberg, we are going to shed the last drop of Austria's blood. Prince Wendy gets retorted. Ferdinand, this is not for anyone else. The French have already bullied our doorstep, which no soldier can tolerate. The duty of a soldier is to obey and serve the country, not for your damn dignity. Both sides drew swords and crossbows, with Franz too wavering in the middle. To be honest, he had a strong aversion to France, but the Napoleonic Wars brought him too many bad memories, and he was a bit afraid. At this moment, bad news came, and a rebellion broke out in Bohemia, protesting against the entry of South German goods into Bohemia. The local garrison couldn't hold back and sought help from Vienna. Franz II put an end to the formation of the South German Customs Union and made every effort to suppress domestic rebellions. After the emperor left, Count Latour glared angrily at Prince Wendy-Goretz, saying, "Stand up. I dare. All discerning people know that Bohemia has 80,000 regular troops, and suppressing an uprising is enough." Chapter 6. Your Majesty governs the world with the nobility, not with the surname Zero. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Returning to reality, the argument in the Mirror Hall is still ongoing. Your Majesty governs the world with the nobility, not with the people. As the ruling class of this country, the nobility is clearly in opposition to the ruled commoners. As a member of the ruling class, they hoped that the emperor would first consider the interests of the nobles. At the same time, the side that supported joining the German Customs Union, including Prince Metternich, Count Korolav, Baron Bruck, were also nobles, and even the emperor himself. However, those who claim to co-rule with the emperor do not represent the interests of the country and ruling class, but their own interests. Their purposes are twofold. First, to block the passage for the transition of the aristocracy and the common class. Second, to use their power to collude with domestic and foreign forces, and to maximize the exploitation of their own people. Simply put, the attributes of this group of people are bureaucrats, landlords, and compradors. Although it was said by a group of petty people with selfish intentions, it sounded fine at the time. At this time, Austria was no longer the Holy Roman Empire under the partition of the states. As the Emperor of Austria, Franz II held absolute power. All of this is thanks to Napoleon, the terminator of the Holy Roman Empire. The Napoleonic Wars greatly weakened the power of local nobles, but unintentionally strengthened Austria's centralization. The situation where small aristocrats dared to support themselves and openly confront the state machinery in the past has disappeared. Even the power of the aristocracy was greatly restricted. Taking Archduke Karl, the largest landowner of the Austrian Empire, as an example, he only had 1,000 private soldiers and could not face the powerful army of the Austrian Empire. Other nobles, on the other hand, have even less ability to resist the state. So now if any nobleman jumps out and says the emperor doesn't want it, I will do the opposite. So Count Latour must be happy to give him a ride. At this moment, a small figure slipped in from the door. The royal guards saw it, but did not stop it. After all, he is just a child. After all, he is the emperor's favorite grandson and the future master of this country. The honest Baron Bruck said. Are you going to govern this country with your majesty? You only care about your own interests. Do you know how much benefits open trade can bring to this country? Our country's finances have been on the brink of bankruptcy, and any disturbance will cause this building to collapse. You are exaggerating. Vienna has the world's largest number of banks. Vienna had the largest number of private banks in the world at that time, but they were all small and mostly in a semi-dead state, completely incomparable to London. But who would lend us money? Are you? The financial industry in Vienna is almost monopolized now, and the country even has to mortgage some tariffs and public power to bankers. Can't you see it? It is only natural to repay debts. Besides, are banks in other countries willing to lend you money? Don't make so many excuses, just look for reasons on yourself. Baron Bruck has been diligent throughout his life, upright and capable. In history, he committed suicide due to being falsely accused and unable to prove himself. It can be said that Austria's finances have not collapsed to this day, which is already a miracle. He completely cannot accept the accusations from others. Do you know how much the empire's fiscal revenue was last year? Baron Bruck asked angrily. Before the other party could answer, Baron Bruck continued. 130.26,009,877 florins. Do you know the total debt of the empire? 146,122,4893 florins. Do you know the total amount of interest that the empire needed to pay for debt extension last year? 112.21096 million florins, you don't know. Baron Brooke roared. So what, God bless me, Austria will last for thousands of years. Do you think this is all your credit, said Pietro, a staff member of Prince Elthasai. He was not nervous, and even retorted. This person graduated from the University of Vienna with excellent grades and once aspired to become a judge. But after waiting in Vienna for 5 years, I couldn't make up for the real shortage. Finally, with the recommendation of his classmates, he became a staff member of the Prince Elthasai family. Since becoming a staff member of Prince Elthasai, his economic situation has improved. But as a result, he also saw more of the dark side of this society. It turned out that he was not outstanding enough, it was just that he had no connections. Those teachers who constantly teach him to abide by laws and regulations actually collude with officials behind the scenes to sell their positions and titles. At this time, Austria had a system of granting official positions, which were directly conferred by the emperor. But the prerequisite for being granted an official position is that you can see the emperor or let the emperor know of your existence. Prince Elthasai was a great noble of Hungary, and even the emperor could not easily touch him. Pietro never hesitates in executing Prince Elthasai's orders. What about the fall of the Austrian Empire? As long as Hungary is still here and Prince Erzhaki is still there, we can give him everything he wants. Pietro added fuel to the fire once again when he saw Baron Brooke's words stuttering. The empire's debts have not been paid off for so many years, why don't you resign? Give your position to those who are capable. Baron Brooke was furious and wanted to continue his theory. Count Korolev stopped Brooke, who was burning with anger. Although he didn't like this guy, his ability was beyond doubt. As the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Korolev naturally has no better understanding than him of how poor Austria's financial situation is. There are usually only 2 ways to increase fiscal revenue, one is open source and the other is cost saving. In terms of cost savings, he has already reached the extreme, even deducting military salaries and imperial pensions, and he will definitely not spend any money he can. Even so, the remaining money each year is only about 10 million yuan. And he couldn't imagine the difficulty of using around 10 million yuan annually to solve the debt problem of billions of dong. But now Brooke has lost his sanity and has been led astray by the other party. 20 years. As long as I join the German customs union, I promise to repay all the empire's debts within 20 years. This is not an empty statement, but a calculation made by the entire Austrian Ministry of Finance and all officials. According to their calculations, joining the German customs union will bring Austria an annual economic growth of 4%. Even so, this is still an extremely substantial income. Korolev glanced at Pietro, who was still contemplating countermeasures. Can you do it? If you can't, just shut up. Count Korolev was very disgusted by people like Pietro who only know how to talk. Korolev scanned the entire room. Who can guarantee to pay off the empire's debts within 20 years? As the Chancellor of the Exchequer, let him be. You're joking. Why should we repay the debts owed by the empire? The nobles were filled with resentment. Besides, it's impossible to repay them. The debt of the Austrian Empire has long been an irreparable black hole in the hearts of the powerful. Since reasoning is not feasible, let's stick to it. Several nobles led by Prince Elthasai walked towards Franz II. Your Majesty governs the world with the nobility, not with the people. Do you want those mud-legged people to ride on our heads? Franz II hesitated a bit, he really didn't know what to do. Seeing the commotion below, he didn't know who to listen to. My ministers seem to be scheming for the country, but who can guarantee that they have no selfish intentions? These nobles may seem incompetent, but they are their own people. Seeing Franz II wavering, some people laughed, and that was the moment they were waiting for. So they got closer and closer to Franz II, trying to use pressure to overpower this weak-willed emperor. Your Majesty, have you forgotten France's attitude? Finally, someone spoke excitedly and walked forward, pulling Franz II's sleeve. Franz also smiled, it was this moment he was waiting for. Chapter 7. It's time to show real skills. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why are you bullying Grandpa? Franz ran over crying. Franz too saw his grandson running over and instinctively pushed Prince Elphasai away from him. Touching his grandson's head, he said. What's wrong? Grandpa is the emperor, no one can bully me. Why are they surrounding you? They even grabbed your arm just now. I saw it all, they're just trying to bully you. I didn't do it. I didn't mean it. Don't talk nonsense, you little devil. Elphasai was used to being falsely accused for no reason, how could he bear it, he said casually. Prince Elphasai realized it was not good and wanted to explain. Although Prince Metternich and Count Korolev were shocked at this, they are old fogies after all. What scene have they never seen? Elphasai, find out your own identity. How dare you speak to Grand Duke Franz like this? The implied meaning of Metternich was that you, Elphasai, don't take the royal family seriously. Count Korolev, on the other hand, was not as tactful as Metternich. He roared directly, what are you going to do to the emperor? Dare you? Count Korolev was quite cunning, as he directly confirmed that Prince Elphasai intended to harm the emperor. Although Grand Duke Franz is not the emperor now, who can guarantee that he will not be in a few decades? With the help of these two big shots, Franz saw that the time was right and he didn't need to say anything, just do one thing. Cry. Originally, Emperor Franz too didn't pay much attention, only thinking that Prince Elphasai was too excited. But after two old men forced each other to burst into flames, an unnamed flame rose in the heart of the old emperor. In addition, Franz suddenly burst into tears, and he finally couldn't contain his anger. He casually threw the golden wine glass towards Prince Elphasai. When it comes to unlucky people, even if they drink a sip of water, they may get stuck in their teeth. Elphasai instinctively blocked it, and the glass bounced back, coincidentally hitting Franz II's forehead. The matter has escalated. Elphasai saw that the situation was not good and wanted to see if Franz II was injured. But the Minister of War, Count Tullard, roared and charged forward. Your Majesty is injured, protect your Majesty. The Grand Duke of Louis, standing beside Franz II, was Franz II's younger brother. He was the commander of the Imperial Palace's Forbidden Army, and although his mind was not very bright, he was absolutely loyal to Franz II personally. At the first moment when Franz II was hit by a glass, the Grand Duke of Louis stood beside him. Upon hearing someone shout, "Protect your Majesty," he instinctively drew his sword. The sword in the hand of Duke Louis is now the only weapon in the entire mirror hall. As soon as he drew his sword, the atmosphere in the entire mirror hall suddenly became tense. The royal guard knew that the Grand Duke's mind was not very good, but those nobles and their attendants were unaware and suddenly became chaotic. The Grand Duke of Louis saw that Elphasai rushed towards his brother and immediately swung a sword. The Grand Duke of Louis just wanted to separate the two, and Elphasai dodged without getting hurt in time. But in the eyes of those below, this scene is a different story. Because he did not trust the Germans, the followers brought by Erzhak this time, except for Petru, only understood Hungarian. So Elphasai brought along those followers who saw this scene and immediately became passionate. Killing the Emperor of Austria and taking his bird seat. This is a common topic among Hungarian nobles, although the nobles may joke about it, the younger nobles as listeners do not think so. Moreover, as retainers of Elphasai, they only recognize Prince Elphasai and do not recognize any Austrian emperors. The followers of Elphasai pretended to rush to the throne and ended up killing the old emperor. The royal guards in the mirror hall may not have enough combat effectiveness, but their loyalty can be guaranteed. After all, many people have served the Habsburg family for several generations, even more than a dozen generations. The entire mirror hall suddenly began to move, and Elphasi's attendants rushed towards the emperor's throne as if they were not fated. The royal forbidden army fought desperately to block it, with some blocking in the middle of the royal road and others rushing directly towards the guards of Elphasi. The captain of the forbidden army directly sounded the alarm that had not been sounded in hundreds of years. Quickly, the 800 imperial guards on duty scattered throughout the palace received news and rushed frantically towards the mirror hall. A bunch of purple fireworks exploded over the palace, and the city defense army and Vienna garrison captain immediately gathered their troops to prepare to support the palace. Within the mirror hall, all of Elphasi's followers have been subdued. Count Tullard took the opportunity to knock down Prince Wendy-Goritz and punched him twice. Prince Metternich hid behind a pillar and waited for the chaos to subside before coming out. Count Korolev, on the other hand, found a nobleman he couldn't stand and beat him up. Only Baron Bruck, a straightforward person, tried to stop Elphasi's followers and was knocked over with a punch. The door was kicked open, and the forbidden army of the battalion rushed into the mirror hall, surrounding everyone. Elphasi looked incredulously at all of this. He couldn't believe his eyes. How could it be like this? To be honest, Franz himself never thought of it. He originally only intended to eliminate the leader of the opposition faction, Elphasi. I didn't expect to be completely eliminated this time. Franz too rubbed the head that had just been smashed, his heart filled with fear and anger. Elphasi, what else do you have to say? I didn't mean to. For God's sake, believe me. Franz too stood up and walked towards Elphasi, who had collapsed to the ground, and drew his sword from the hand of the Grand Duke of Louis. Seeing this scene, Elphasi's body was shrouded in fear. He kept backing back with his hands, repeating, "My ancestors have made contributions to the empire, shed blood for the empire." Franz too remained expressionless and raised his sword. I still have a deposit of 3 million florins at Vienna Bank. UU reading www.uukangshu.net. Franz too's sword came to a stop in front of Elphasi. Elphasi felt a heat under his body and was afraid he needed to change his pants. Franz too took a deep breath and said, Elphasi, who was unaware of his identity, mistakenly brought an assassin into the palace. He remembered the merits of his ancestors, but was also deceived. He is now stripped of his title, confiscated of all his assets in Vienna, and ordered to return to Hungary immediately. He is not allowed to step into Vienna in this life. Franz too turned around and walked towards the throne, throwing the sword in his hand to the Grand Duke of Louis. The Grand Duke of Louis put away his sword and waved at the forbidden army. Prince Elphasi was dragged out by 2 forbidden soldiers, and his eyes were lifeless as if he had lost half of his life. Elphasi's family owns large tracts of land in Hungary, but most of their wealth is used to purchase industries in Vienna. So it's not wrong to take half of his life. Compared to Prince Elphasi, his followers were not as lucky. Petru was also brought out by the forbidden army as he was also brought by Elphasi. Petru thought that he might have to spend the rest of his life in prison. He just saw that a forbidden army had pulled out a twisted stick from the bag. He wanted to run away and shout, but was gagged with a piece of cloth. Petru only felt someone tugging at him from behind, and the noose was tied around his neck. The forbidden army behind him began to spin the noose at the other end. The wriggling stick was circling around, and Pietro struggled fiercely due to lack of oxygen. He tried to hold on to the noose with both hands in an attempt to save himself, but the other party was an old hand and did not give him a chance. Petru's feet stomped on the ground twice and then stopped struggling. A total of 13 corpses were loaded onto a special carriage and sent out of the palace in the evening. Chapter 8. Refusal to fight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Returning to the throne, Franz too picked up Franz. No one in this world can bully an emperor, no one can bully me, and no one can bully you. Grandpa taught you to be an emperor today. Just bullied Prince Elphasi, this unlucky guy. At this moment, Franz too was in a great mood, feeling like he had returned to his former self, full of ambition and determined to sweep across France and Europe. "Where have we discussed?" Franz too asked awkwardly. "Join the German Customs Union," Metternich whispered as a reminder. "Korolev, listen, good guy." He exclaimed in his heart, "Good guy. This is purely misleading the emperor." So he said, "Prussia has already joined the German Customs Union one step ahead of us. As the chairman of the German Confederation, our Austrian Empire has no reason to fall behind." Baron Bruck thought to himself, "Lie down, how could these two guys be so shameless? Even though they don't even bother with their 8 characters, it seems like they're all set to compete with Prussia for leadership." He then said, "Joining the German Customs Union is not only beneficial for consolidating our country's leadership position in the German states, but also for increasing the country's fiscal revenue and facilitating the return of precious metals. According to Count Kollarov's estimate, the empire's debt can be repaid in 20 years. If not, I am willing to resign along with Count Kollarov." After the Napoleonic Wars, countries sought to prevent the outflow of precious metals. High trade barriers have been set up to prevent other countries from exploiting gold and silver. Austria's precious metal reserves were seriously insufficient at this time, and the paper currency lacked credibility. The empire was heavily indebted. So what Baron Bruck said was the pain point of the Austrian Empire, which aroused great interest from Franz too. Metternich and Count Korolev cast contemptuous gazes together, cursing inwardly, "It turns out that you, with your thick eyebrows and big eyes, are the most shameless." The nobles had not yet recovered from the shock just now, but were once again shocked by the shamelessness of these 3 ministers. But Prince Elthasai's warning from the past has left these elites hesitant to move forward. After all, the old emperor in front of us is like being beaten with chicken blood, and no one wants to touch this mold. So the nobles turned their attention to Prince Wendy-Goretz. After all, he had military power among his title masters, so there shouldn't be any problem. Under the gaze of the crowd, Prince Wendy-Goretz could only grit his head and say, "Your Majesty, you know that the French once demanded that the 3 countries of South Germany withdraw from the customs union we formed. In case." Wendy-Goretz didn't mention the French, but when he mentioned them, Franz too, who was full of anger, immediately became uncontrollable. "French. Damn it. This is the German Customs Union. This is an internal matter of the German Confederation. Why do they interfere? They dare. Remind the German states, if France dares to interfere, go to war. Notify the countries of the Holy Alliance that if the French go to war against us, demand that they fulfill their sacred obligations. In short, if the French want to fight, we will accompany them to the end." The ministers in the Mirror Hall were also infected by the emperor's emotions and applauded one after another. The Minister of War, Count Tullard, was even more tearful. He followed the monarch for decades and finally stood firm before shouting, "Go to Paris." However, this time no one catered. Everyone shook their heads, indicating that it was impossible. Count Tullard, upon seeing this, had no choice but to pretend that nothing had happened. Metternich also sighed, if only the emperor could be so tough every time. But this note is a bit difficult to handle. Even though Prussia was an important state of Germany and a member of the Holy Alliance, it was the country that opposed Austria's accession to the German Customs Union the most. I just don't know how the King of Prussia feels when he sees this note. As for the French, the possibility of their military intervention, which has just experienced internal turmoil, is almost zero. Moreover, if the French were to take action, the Holy Alliance would not be a decoration. After just a few decades of peaceful life, I believe France will not have another Napoleon. Franz also applauded at the right time to make the old man happy. At first glance, the privileged know that there is no future ahead, but will their passion always be exhausted? The key to procrastination is to be able to procrastinate and able to procrastinate, which is important for politics. The reason is also very simple, such as contacting envoys from various states and preparing venues. Although it is a trivial matter, it cannot be refused. After all, although the matter is small, the relationship is not small, and it can only be said by these nobles. During this period, the powerful should seek foreign aid, bribe, give money, and spread rumors. In short, the 8 immortals crossed the sea, each displaying their divine abilities, just to prevent Austria from joining the German customs union. It's just that today's matter was agreed upon by the emperor, and it would be difficult to change it again. On the other hand, Metternich, Count Korolav, Baron Bruck, Count Latour, and the almost non-existent Minister of the Interior, Pillersdorf, are also preparing for the final backlash from the powerful. After all, these guys with no lower limits, God knows what they will do. Count Tullard has sent a large number of old generals who have participated in the anti-French war, such as Haynau, Ladsky, Anton Fong, etc., to the most important position and reminded them to be even more careful. What he needs to do now is to give these generals enough soldiers and sufficient authority. He doesn't want to have another uprising under his nose. Baron Bruck needs to contact Austrian bankers to make them believe that the country still has a future and raise as much money as possible. Due to the cancellation of tariffs and the opening of border trade, the amount of money needed will be astronomical. For this, he must drain the last drop of blood from those bankers. Metternich needs to persuade as many domestic elites as possible. After all, having one more friend means one less enemy. Of course, in addition to the domestic opposition, there are also the nobles and nobles of various German states. His secret police and lovers have uncovered the preferences of various princes and ambassadors. Based on this, Metternich specially prepared gifts for each of them. This also includes the King of Prussia and the Ambassador of Prussia, as well as the chief designer of the German customs union. Friedrich List. I heard that Friedrich List's investment failed and his life is very difficult now. Now, after joining the German customs union, the Austrian Empire urgently needs such talents. How did I think of this person? Oh, by the way. It seems like the Grand Duke lost the paper airplane, and the Grand Duke of Franz is really the lucky star of this country. Metternich sighed in his heart, but didn't think much. Isn't it normal for children to like to pull paper and stack strange things, throwing them around? And most importantly, let Franz too not backtrack. After all, this emperor is unpredictable, not just once or twice. Today, I want to thank the future emperor again, otherwise they wouldn't even have the chance to make the final move now. Chapter 9. Friedrich List. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The 30.8 tariffs of Germany paralyzed domestic transportation. They were like tying a person's hands and feet tightly, preventing blood from flowing. Only by abolishing internal tariffs and establishing a unified federal tax system can national trade and national industry be restored, which is also beneficial to the working class. Friedrich List, the father of the German customs union and the challenger to Adam Smith, the author of The Wealth of Nations, lived a legendary life. The full name is always used here to distinguish it from the musician Liszt who came later. On August 6, 1789, Friedrich List was baptized in Reutlingen. Usually, babies are baptized on the day of birth. Friedrich List was born into a family of craftsmen, and his father was a famous cobbler. During his student days, he also worked part-time as a leather-making apprentice to help his father. But soon he showed astonishing talent and passed the financial officer examination of the Württemberg royal family, becoming a government clerk. After working in the government for a few years, he was sent to university as a professor due to his priority in workability. No one would have thought that this was just the beginning of his cheating life, after which Friedrich List left university and became the president of the Württemberg Chamber of Commerce. Afterwards, he became a member of parliament in Württemberg, just over 30 years old. Afterwards, he left Württemberg and headed to the New World, United States. I built a farm in the United States, started a newspaper, and started a railway company. Finally, I used the money I earned to buy a mine, and in my spare time, I wrote the outline of American political economy. Afterwards, he was even appointed as the Consul General of the United States to the Federal Republic of Germany by the 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson. In 1832, he returned to Württemberg and began sketching a railway network covering all of Germany. But his national railway system plan failed due to feudal separatism and the narrow profit-driven nature of the bourgeoisie. In the end, only a castrated version railway with a total length of 115 kilometers was obtained, from Leipzig to Dresden. Friedrich opened a joint stock company in collaboration with others to build railways, but his shares were supposed to belong to him. He was assured that the Leipzig people were different from the Americans, and that the Germans did not deceive their two friends. The two fraudsters convinced Friedrich List that all that remained at the time was just a formality, so he did not sign the contract. When Friedrich List realized he had been deceived, the other party had successfully cashed out and disappeared without a trace. In the end, this investment not only did not bring him any returns, but also caused him to lose 10,000 thalers. Friedrich List, who was somewhat down and out, had to stay in a cheap family inn. He dragged his tired body back to his room, only to find that the door was actually open. He immediately rushed into the room, where an old gentleman was leisurely drinking tea. The attendant standing next to him was quite handsome and burly, with a straight eye, knowing at a glance that he was a servant of a powerful official. The old gentleman put down his teacup and spoke first. "Mr. List, please take a seat." Friedrich List took off his hat and bowed deeply, saying, "Sir, this is my room." "Now it's mine." The old gentleman smiled and took out a piece of paper, gesturing for the attendant to show it to Friedrich List. Friedrich List glanced at it and realized it was a land deed. "Can I take my things?" Friedrich List pointed to the nearby cabinet. "Mr. List, please don't worry. I'm here to give gifts." "Are you Santa Claus?" asked Friedrich List. "If you wish, yes. Let's get to the point. My name is Berg Turner and I am Lord Metternich's butler. Today, I have two things to do. The first one is to give you a gift and return your loss, and I have also brought two friends." Berg clapped his hands, and two burly men carrying two burlap bags walked in. They then slammed the burlap bags heavily onto the ground, making a dull noise. Then the sack was opened, revealing the two fraudsters who made Friedrich List's teeth itch with hatred. Friedrich List immediately stepped forward and kicked twice. The two fraudsters were now bound, with rags in their mouths, and could only make two muffled groans. "Are they the secret police of Austria?" Friedrich List asked. "No, they're just enthusiastic citizens who happened to pass by," Berg replied slowly, then said, "Mr. List, are you still satisfied with this gift?" "Satisfied, you can talk about the second thing." List is a sensible person, naturally knowing that the other party will not be idle in courting. "My master wants to meet you. He thinks you are very talented and should serve His Majesty the Emperor." "What if I say I won't go?" List asked tentatively, then pointed to the two big men next to him. "Will they catch me in a sack?" "No, Mr. List. My master is a civilized person, but I am not. Whether I say you are an X-man or a dangerous person, as long as I have this face, it is enough." Berg stood up and straightened his collar. "You convinced me, Mr. Berg." Vienna, Mirror Hall. Franz II held a high throne, and the ministers and nobles below each had their own thoughts, but on the contrary, they appeared to be each performing their duties in an orderly manner. Franz II proudly said, "Child, look. Emperor, the most important temperament. You must first have a domineering aura, and then you can make them bow down and submit." But Franz still pretended to be very admiring and said in a childish tone, "Grandpa, why do the French oppose Austria's accession to the German customs union? The French are all bad guys, they are afraid of us being good. Austria is the chairman of the German Confederation, and we should protect the interests of the German states, so we must join the German customs union." Franz too wanted to educate his grandson, but he accidentally got himself involved. Franz saw the old emperor digging a pit for himself, so he pushed it again. Grandpa, Grandpa, are those who share the same views as the French all bad people? Franz too fell silent. Metternich almost spat out old blood, he's really Austria's savior. Unexpectedly, the clearest thing about the entire royal family was actually a child. However, the nobles in the mirror hall didn't have a good expression, especially Prince Wendy-Goritz, who felt that the old emperor was watching him and his gaze could kill him. I quickly found an excuse and left the mirror hall as if fleeing. Other nobles saw two bosses, one exiled to Hungary and the other urinating. Their confidence also collapsed, so they could only be scattered when the tree fell. Watching the crowd frantically escaping from the mirror hall, Franz too fell into contemplation. He didn't realize in the past that he trusted a group of cunning people. Count Korolev thinks this is good, it seems that the workload can be reduced a lot. Count Latour, on the other hand, continued his work and felt that those guys would not give up so easily. They must guard against it. Of course, this is also related to the personal character of Count Latour. After all, he is a soldier, and once he makes a mistake, he loses his life. Now Metternich, Korolev, and Bruck are all thinking about the same thing. Should we also bring Archduke Franz with us in the next political discussion? Chapter 10. Undercurrent. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Berlin. William III looked at the Austrian state book on the table and slammed it hard. Austrians shamelessly demand to join us. Watching His Majesty the King so angry, most of the high-level officials in Prussia remained unmoved. Even many people are speaking up for Austria, shamelessly speaking up. Only the German customs union, which includes Austria, can be called a true German customs union. This statement has infuriated William III. Why did he raise such a group of white-eyed wolves? Of course, the white-eyed wolf will also look at the situation and immediately change its tone when it's not good. Brandenburg's destiny was to receive the legacy of the Holy Roman Empire, annex Austria, expel Hungary, and establish a true German state. Upon hearing these words, William III's anger subsided slightly. It is obvious that Metternich's gold attack has had an effect. After all, the interests of the country are not as tangible as the money in one's own hands. No country lacks greedy individuals and loyal individuals. Prussian Chancellor of the Exchequer Merz was such a person. As the initiator and actual manager of the German customs union, he was well aware of how many tricks the Austrians had played in the middle. Firstly, we watched the emergence of 3 tariff alliances within Germany, and then, like the British, we drifted outside the various alliance systems, maintaining a tripartite balance among the 3 alliances, with the intention of causing Prussia to continuously decline amidst internal friction. But fortunately, the Sino-German business alliance itself was not stable, and there was constant debate over the issue of unified tariffs within the organization, which eventually led to its disintegration. The South German Customs Union is sandwiched between France and Austria, with a relatively small space that makes it difficult for them to make any progress. Shortly thereafter, the Sino-German Commercial Union and the South German Customs Union collapsed one after another, but the Austrians did not give up. They successively wooed Saxony in the South German states, intending to form their own customs union, but all came to nothing. Your Majesty, we must not allow Austria to join. Our industry is still too fragile. Austrians have a first-mover advantage over us. If we allow Austrians to enter the German customs union, what awaits us will be endless logging. Then the Austrians will use the money plundered from us to purchase our resources and sell them to us as commodities. One day, we will become their slaves like the Irish. Gentlemen, what should we do? William III asked. Austria must be excluded, otherwise trade barriers can only be set up for trade protection. Isn't the purpose of establishing the German customs union to eliminate trade barriers and engage in free market trade? That's on the premise that we can harvest others, rather than letting others harvest. The person fell silent, but the voices of discussion grew louder. Prime Minister Wei Lishi knew how to persuade these idiots who didn't understand economics, so he shouted loudly. Damn it! Austrians must be excluded. If Hungarian food comes in, who will sell our food to? This statement immediately received a response from the landlord of Junker. What they don't know is that there is still a group of people like them in Hungary at this moment. Budapest, damn it. Damn it. The emperor is actually joining the German customs union. What should we do in Hungary? What's wrong with this? I can still buy things cheaper in the future. I'm tired of always buying Austrian products. This time I went shopping in Berlin, and I heard that the prostitutes there are all serious. Serious nonsense. Let Prussian grain come in, who will we sell our grain to? The Hungarian landlords immediately responded, we must not allow Prussian food to enter Hungary. If the emperor does not accept our plea, we will go to Vienna. The roar was deafening. Prince Elphasai was just silently watching the crazy crowd in a corner. Although he liked to say that, he knew very well that Hungary could not defeat Austria at this time, otherwise it would not have been as simple as shouting slogans. Besides, he misses his palace in Vienna a bit. As far as the entertainment industry is concerned, Vienna has been leading Budapest for centuries. Hanover. What? Austrians are actually joining the German customs union. What are they thinking? Aren't they afraid of the outflow of gold? Austria can join, so can we, said a minister. Are you an idiot? Do those Germans have money? Let's exchange real gold and silver for Austrian waste paper. Our gold must not be wasted on meaningless competition. At that time, there were already signs of an economic crisis in the UK, with a severe shortage of precious metals. The policy adopted by the UK government is to crazily raise trade barriers to prevent the outflow of precious metals and to cope with potential runs on the market. Mainstream European countries have followed suit, but Austria's own debt has exceeded its dangerous value, and it is meaningless to reserve precious metals. On the contrary, this stable but non-redeemable paper currency appears safer. Saxony, Dresden. Austrians planning to join the German customs union. Yes, the Prussians demanded that we oppose Austria and reject Austria's request to join the German customs union. Why refuse? Isn't it good to let Austrians come in and fight against Prussians? Saxony is the center of Germany, and both Austrians and Prussians cannot do without us. Let tigers and wolves compete, and we'll take advantage of both sides. Isn't it beautiful? Your Majesty, wise. France, Paris. Marshal Soult, who was old and frail, no longer had the appearance he had when he was a soldier. He had been in a state of half asleep and half awake. That's it, the Austrians planned to join the tariff union initiated by the Prussians. The Prussians don't seem to want them to join, and there have been some internal disturbances among the Austrians. I think we should immediately organize the Fabian League to counter the Austrians. Gogh finished his report and expressed his own thoughts. All right, I'm already old. His Majesty the King trusts me and trusts you. I know you have great abilities, and I trust you too. As long as you have a clear conscience and are worthy of His Majesty the King and God, that's good. The old marshal just wanted to retire safely, so he pushed it clean. Thank you, for your trust. I will do my best not to disappoint your Majesty and your high expectations. Gogh has also become accustomed to Surti not sticking to the pot, and he doesn't have time to play Tai Chi with this old man. The Fabian League has always been Gogh's dream. At this time, although Belgium had just gained independence, it was the first country on the entire European continent to industrialize. The industrial strength is incredibly strong, and the national quality is very high. Moreover, Belgium has a unique position, and by incorporating Belgium into France's sphere of influence, it can definitely enhance France's strength and influence. Further, the entire lowlands can be incorporated into the territory of France. Gogh's idea is very good. The Fabian League is indeed both offensive and defensive, and can also enhance commercial competitiveness. But he overlooked the most important issue, which is the British. There is a joke that even Belgian people can fly kites to England. Low-land countries are definitely the enemy of the British. The British will not allow any strong country to meddle in lowland countries. The British have always been afraid that a country will occupy the lowlands and use them as a springboard to attack mainland England. For Austria's accession to the German customs union, the same military threat as last time may not be effective. I don't know what the Emperor of the Austrian Empire was up to, but he said he was going to war. The Emperor of Austria was able to take a breath because that family was already abnormal. But Gogh can't take a breath, he and France can't afford this risk. It's the traitors within Austria who can make good use of it. Moreover, the Prussians were not willing to accept their own pigs and let the Austrians cut off their beards. To be fair, although France may not appreciate Austria's industrial strength, there is still a high chance that Austrians and Prussians will compete to win. The Prussians were also aware of this, which made it much easier to handle. Gogh already has a plan to unite anti-Austrian forces within Austria and the German customs union. Find a way to refuse Austria's accession to the German customs union, and once Austrians enter the German customs union, it will no longer be an issue for Austria. But it was an internal issue for Germany, although France had never given up its ambitions for the Rhine region. At this time France was still unable to support his ambitions.